Welcome to our exploration of a chilling chapter in American history. On that crisp autumn morning of October 24, 1987, the small town was enveloped in a profound sense of mourning. They called him charming, intelligent, and even the boy next door. But beneath that disarming smile lay a darkness that would haunt the nation. From the early to late 1970s, women across America began to vanish without a trace, leaving behind a trail of fear that spread like wildfire. At the center of this turmoil was one man, a law student, a political volunteer, and ultimately, a killer. His name was Ted Bundy. In this series, we will delve into the shadows of Bundy's life, uncovering the complexities of a man who appeared so ordinary yet was capable of unimaginable horror. Join us as we navigate this unsettling journey, seeking to understand the enigma that captivated and terrified a nation. Thank you for being here, and if you find this exploration compelling, consider following us for more insights. Episode 1. A Normal Beginning. Ted Bundy was born on November 24, 1946, in Burlington, Vermont. His childhood seemed ordinary, even unremarkable. He grew up believing his grandparents were his parent, and his mother was his older sister. That family secret would shape a boy who always felt different on the outside looking in. Friends and neighbors described young Ted as polite, intelligent, and well-mannered. He blended in, but there were early signs: a fascination with knives, sneaking around at night, and an unsettling obsession with control. By the time Ted was a teenager in Tacoma, Washington, he was already learning how to hide his urges behind a mask of charm. Episode 2. The Double Life. Fast forward to the 1970s. Ted Bundy is in his mid-20s. He's studying law, volunteering at political campaigns, even working at a suicide prevention hotline. To the outside world, Ted seemed like the kind of young man who could someday run for office. But this was only one side of him. Late at night, Bundy prowled neighborhoods, watching women through windows, following them as they walked home. He was testing his power, feeding a hunger he could barely control. By 1974, women around Seattle began to vanish. No bodies, no witnesses, just fear. Episode 3. The first victims. In January 1974, Bundy escalated. A University of Washington student, Lyndoine Healy, disappeared from her apartment. Her bed was neatly made, sheets tucked in, but there was blood on the pillow. Then, more women began to vanish. Janet saw it, Denise Naslin, and others. They were young, beautiful, often with long brown hair parted down the middle. Bundy had a type. Each disappearance followed a chillingly similar pattern. A young woman lured away by a man pretending to be injured, wearing a fake cast, or asking for help carrying books. Bundy's charm was his deadliest weapon. Episode 4. A pattern emerged. This summer, police realized they weren't dealing with random kidnappings. Witnesses began describing a man named Ted, driving a Volkswagen Beetle. At Lake Sammamish State Park, 2 women disappeared in broad daylight: Janice and Denise Naslin. Multiple witnesses recalled seeing a man with his arm in a sling, asking women for help. His name? Ted. For the first time, law enforcement had a suspect profile. But Bundy was careful. He moved fast, leaving no evidence behind. Episode 5. The cliffhanger. By the end of 1974, Ted Bundy had abducted and murdered multiple women across Washington and Oregon. Investigators had his description. They even had his name. But Bundy wasn't done. He was only getting started. Episode 1. Survivors speak. Not everyone Ted Bundy approached disappeared. Some women managed to get away, and their stories helped investigators piece together a terrifying picture. He would walk up with a sling on his arm, or crutches, asking for help with books or a sailboat. His voice was polite, his smile disarming, and then, the switch flipped. These survivors described a man in his mid-20s, dark, wavy hair, clean cut, driving a tan Volkswagen Beetle, and he often introduced himself by a single name: Ted, for police. This was a start, but in 1970s America, connecting crimes across different states was nearly impossible. There was no national database, no instant communication between jurisdictions. Bundy was exploiting the cracks in the system. Episode 2. The Seattle Manhunt. By the summer of 1974, Seattle police were overwhelmed. 5 women had vanished within months. Detectives posted flyers on college campuses, asking for tips. Soon, hundreds of calls poured in, and buried within them was the name Ted Bundy. A co-worker from the suicide hotline called in. So did a former girlfriend. Even one of his law professors. They all said the same thing: you should look into Ted Bundy. Police added his name to the suspect list, but he didn't stand out. After all, Bundy was smart, polite, and ambitious. He even worked for the Republican Party in Washington. Could a man like that really be a killer? Episode 3. The Lake Sammamish Horror. On July 14, 1974, Lake Sammamish State Park was crowded with thousands of sunbathers and families. Among them, Ted Bundy was hunting in plain sight. Witnesses later described a man with his arm in a sling. Introducing himself as Ted, he asked women to help load a sailboat into his tan Volkswagen. By the end of the day, 2 women were gone, Janice Ott and Denise Naslund. This time, dozens of witnesses saw him. They described his clothes, his car, his name. Police finally had something solid. A composite sketch was released to the public, and for the first time, Ted Bundy's face was out in the open. Episode 4. Too smart to catch, but Bundy was always one step ahead. He moved states: Utah, Colorado, Idaho, taking new victims wherever he went. Each disappearance carried his signature, a friendly approach, a quick attack, and no evidence left behind. Bundy studied police methods. He knew how to leave a clean crime scene. Detectives were frustrated. They had eyewitnesses, they had a name, they even had his car model. Yet Bundy continued killing, and then something unexpected happened. Episode 5. The arrest that changed everything. In August 1975, a highway patrol officer in Utah pulled over a suspicious Volkswagen Beetle. Inside, he found handcuffs, a ski mask, a crowbar, and trash bags. It was the first time Ted Bundy's mask slipped. He was arrested for possession of burglary tools, but investigators knew these weren't for breaking into houses. They were for hunting women. For the first time, Bundy was in custody. Narrator low, dramatic pause. But the question was, could they prove what he had done? Episode 1. The evidence game. In 1975, police in Utah began connecting Bundy to several disappearances. His tan Volkswagen was searched, and fibers, hair strands, and handcuffs were discovered. But the evidence was thin, circumstantial. Prosecutors knew they needed a survivor. That's when Carol Darren stepped forward. She was one of the few who had escaped Bundy's clutches. She recalled how a man posing as a police officer tried to handcuff her before she fought her way out of his car. Her testimony would put Bundy on trial. Episode 2. The courtroom show. Bundy stood trial in Utah for the kidnapping of Carol Darren. The world was beginning to see the man behind the charm. He was calm, he was articulate, and unlike most defendants, he represented himself in court. Bundy believed he was smarter than the lawyers, smarter than the judge, smarter than everyone. The jury didn't agree. He was convicted and sentenced to up to 15 years in prison. But even behind bars, Bundy was plotting his next move. Episode 3. Escape artist. While serving his sentence, Bundy learned he was also facing murder charges in Colorado. The net was tightening, but Bundy was always thinking ahead. In 1977, while being transported to a courthouse in Aspen, Colorado, Bundy asked to use the law library to prepare his defense. No one noticed when he slipped out of a second-story window. For 6 days, Ted Bundy was free, hiding in the mountains before being recaptured. It was a stunt that proved how dangerous he really was. Episode 4. The Disappearing Act. Part I. But Bundy wasn't finished. Later that same year, in December 1977, Bundy made his second and most daring escape. This time, he sawed a hole in the ceiling of his cell, losing weight to fit through the tiny opening. Guards didn't notice. By the time they checked, Bundy was long gone. He stole a car, changed clothes, and vanished into the night. For law enforcement, it was a nightmare. Their suspect, their convicted kidnapper, their prime murder suspect, has slipped through their fingers again. Episode 5. The cliffhanger. Ted Bundy wasn't hiding anymore. He was on the move, and he wasn't going back to prison. He headed south, crossing state lines, leaving Colorado behind. Episode 1. A new hunting ground. Bundy arrived in Tallahassee, Florida, under a new identity. He rented a room near Florida State University, blending into the college town. To the people who met him, he was polite, quiet, even charming. No one suspected that within weeks, he would unleash one of the most horrifying attacks in American history. Episode 2. The Chi Omega Massacre. In the night of January 15, 1978, Ted Bundy broke into the Chi Omega sorority house at FSU. What followed was a frenzy of violence. He bludgeoned and strangled Margaret Bowman and Lisa Levy to death. He brutally attacked Karen Chandler and Kathy Kleiner, who miraculously survived. The assault lasted only minutes, but the brutality shocked the nation. The once polite law student was now exposed as a savage killer. Episode 3. More victims, more fear. Just 2 weeks later, Bundy struck again. His victim was 12-year-old Kimberly Leach, kidnapped from her school in Lake City, Florida. This was Bundy at his most reckless. No disguises, no careful planning, just raw violence. For investigators, this was the final straw. The manhunt intensified. Bundy was no longer an unknown predator. He was America's most wanted man. Episode 4. The Cop. In February 15, 1978, a Pensacola police officer pulled over a suspicious vehicle. The driver had stolen plates and fake IDs. When questioned, the man finally said the words, "I wish you had killed me. It was Ted Bundy. After years of evasion, Bundy was back in custody, but this time, there would be no escape. Episode 5, the cliffhanger. Florida prosecutors prepared for the trial of the century. They had eyewitnesses. They had forensic evidence. They had Bundy's victims, those who survived, to testify. Episode 1, the showman in court in Miami. Bundy stood trial for the Chi Omega murders. Cameras captured his every smirk, every sharp word, every attempt to charm the jury. He insisted on acting as his own lawyer. Bundy cross-examined witnesses, argued with prosecutors, and even flirted with women in the courtroom. For Bundy, this wasn't just a trial, it was a stage. Episode 2, the evidence speaks, but no amount of charm could erase the evidence. Bite marks on victim Lisa Levy's body matched Bundy's teeth. Eyewitnesses placed him near the sorority house. Survivors described his attacks in chilling detail. Forensic science was still new in the late 70s, but in Bundy's case, it was enough. Episode 3, a circus atmosphere outside the courthouse. Crowds gathered daily. Some carried signs demanding Bundy's execution. Shockingly, others, mostly young women, showed up to admire him, calling him handsome and misunderstood. The phenomenon baffled psychologists. How could a man accused of such horror still attract admirers? It was the Bundy paradox, charm and evil wrapped in one. Episode 4, the death sentence. In July 24, 1979, after weeks of testimony and media frenzy, the jury reached a verdict, guilty of murder. As the judge prepared to sentence him, Bundy remained calm, but the words sealed his fate. Judge Edward Coward, it is ordered that you be put to death by a current of electricity. Take care of yourself, young man. I say that to you sincerely. You are a bright young man. You'd have made a good lawyer. I would have loved to have you practice in front of me, but you went another way, partner. The nation watched as Bundy was sentenced to death. Episode 5, the cliffhanger. But Bundy's story wasn't over. He still faced another trial for the murder of 12-year-old Kimberly Leach. In 1980, Bundy was once again found guilty. Again, he was sentenced to death. Now, the countdown began. Bundy was trapped on Florida's death row, but even in a cage, he managed to manipulate, confess, and terrify America one last time. Narrator Somber. Final note. In our final season, we confront Bundy's and the confessions, the fear, and the execution that drew crowds outside the prison gates.
Subscribe to the channel.